The sun hung lazily over the village of Ogidi, casting long shadows on the rust-colored footpaths that crisscrossed the land like forgotten scars. The scent of roasted maize mingled with the earthy aroma of wet cassava and dust, a smell that was both comforting and wearying, like the embrace of an old, burdened friend. Amara balanced a calabash of water on her head as she made her way back home from the stream. Beads of sweat clung to her temple, and her wrapper, once a bright shade of yellow, was now faded and fraying at the edges. But her beauty, like a flame hidden under ash, remained. Soft, brown eyes that held secrets and sadness, and lips that had forgotten how to smile freely. At 23, Amara was still unmarried, an anomaly in Ogidi. The village women whispered that she was cursed, and the men, though enchanted by her looks, saw only her poverty and her burdened life. A widowed mother bedridden with asthma, 2 younger siblings who needed schooling, and a family farm that yielded more weeds than yam. She arrived at the compound and placed the calabash gently beside the cooking stones. The house, made of mud bricks and roofed with rusted zinc, seemed to sigh as she entered. "Mama," she called softly. Inside, her mother, Mama Izine, lay on a bamboo mat, her breathing raspy. Her frame, once full and commanding, was now a mere whisper of the woman who once sang the loudest during harvest dances. Amara knelt beside her. "I brought your medicine leaf. I'll boil it now." Mama Izine opened her eyes. "My daughter, you are working too hard." Amara forced a smile. "What choice do we have, Mama? Should we wait for manna to fall?" Her mother chuckled weakly. "Your tongue is sharper than your father's cutlass." As she boiled the herbs over the fire outside, a distant shout caught her attention. It was Kioma, her neighbor and childhood friend, running down the hill with skirts flying. "Amara! Amara!" she called breathlessly. "Come quickly!" Amara dropped the wooden spoon. "What is it?" "Chief Olowu is calling a meeting at the square. He says it concerns you." Her heart clenched. "Me? What have I done?" "I don't know. But your name is on his lips. The whole village is gathering." The village square buzzed like a disturbed beehive. Men in their wrappers and red caps stood in groups, while women clutched their children tightly as if shielding them from invisible curses. Amara stood stiffly at the edge of the crowd, trying to quiet her pounding heart. Chief Olowu, the pot-bellied custodian of tradition and self-declared, voice of the gods, raised his hand. His coral beads clinked as he spoke. "People of Ogidi," he began, voice booming, "our village faces many challenges, and among them is the matter of our daughters and the shame of unmarried age." Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Have spoken to the elders and consulted the oracle," Chief Olowu continued, his gaze narrowing at Amara. "It is decided. Amara Ezine, daughter of the late hunter Okonkwo, shall be given in marriage to Ekene, the wanderer who has returned to our land." A gasp exploded through the air. Amara staggered back, the words like stones thrown at her chest. "What?" she whispered. "Ekene? The man who arrived a month ago, dusty and thin, who spoke little and lived in the abandoned hut near the edge of the bush?" "That man." Kioma clutched her hand. "They can't be serious." But they were. Chief Olowu continued. "Ekene may be poor, but he is a man. He offered to marry Amara with the few goats and tubers he has. In return, we end her shame, and she gains a husband who honors our traditions." Amara's voice rose, trembling. "I was not asked." "I do not agree," the crowd murmured in disapproval. A woman hissed. "Is she too good for marriage now?" Another added, "She wants to choose like the city girls." Chief Olowu's eyes darkened. "You forget yourself, Amara. You are a woman of this land. You live in your mother's mud hut. You have no bride price waiting. You should thank the gods for sending a man at all." Ekene stood silently at the side. He wore a torn shirt and slippers, his head bowed. He looked neither proud nor ashamed. Amara's eyes burned with tears. "This is not marriage. This is punishment." She turned and fled, her feet barely touching the ground as she ran home, past the cassava fields, past the mocking laughter, past the weight of her helplessness. Amara sat beside her mother, eyes swollen from a night of crying. Mama Ezine held her hand gently. "I have nothing to give you, Amara. I failed to prepare a better life for you, but I ask you, endure. Mama, I don't love him. I don't even know him. Sometimes. Love comes after duty. Your father and I were forced too, but he treated me well. That is what matters. A man's heart." Amara bit her lip. "But why now? Why him?" Mama Ezine sighed. "Ikeni came to me last week. Quietly. He asked for your hand, said he would protect you, care for you. He didn't speak like the others." Amara blinked. "You agreed?" "I said only if the elders approved. I never thought they would rush it so." There was silence. Outside, a goat bleated as if mocking her grief. Then Amara stood. "Fine. If this is my fate, I'll wear it like cloth. But may the gods be my witness. I will not give him my heart." There were no drums, no dancers. Just a circle of villagers watching with mild curiosity as Amara, in a faded wrapper and borrowed blouse, stood beside Akin at the shrine. Chief Olowu poured libation on the ground. "Let this union be bound by earth and spirit." Akini looked. At her once, his eyes unreadable. Then he said, "I vow to protect her with my life." Amara said nothing. Her hands trembled as the elder tied a red string around their wrists, a symbol of unity. After the ceremony, the two of them walked in, silence to their new home, a small mud house Akini had swept and prepared. Inside, there was only a bamboo bed, a mat, a stool, and a clay pot. Amara sat on the mat. "You've said little. Speak." "Why me?" Akin took a breath. "Because you have endured, and I know what it means to suffer in silence." She eyed him. "You speak like a man who's lived 1,000 lives." He smiled faintly. "Perhaps I have." The first weeks of Amara's marriage passed like a quiet drizzle, neither stormy nor sunny, but always lingering. Ikene rose early, often before dawn, and disappeared into the bush with a cutlass slung over his shoulder. He would return before noon with bundles of firewood or baskets of wild herbs and mushrooms. He worked hard, never complained, and always brought something home, but it was his silence that unnerved Amara the most. They rarely spoke beyond greetings and routine discussions. What to cook, how to manage the goats, when to fetch water. He never touched her, never pressured her for affection, and never once stepped into the bamboo bed unless she was already asleep. It was as though he respected a boundary she had not explicitly drawn. And yet, there was something about him that tugged at her curiosity, something that didn't fit. It was on a Thursday morning that Amara found it. Akane had gone to the stream while she swept the small compound. As she adjusted his folded wrapper on the stool, a white envelope slipped out. Her hand froze. Villagers rarely used envelopes. Letters were for people in cities, bankers, students, politicians. She hesitated, then picked it up. It had no address, just a logo, a golden EU holding seal, embossed like something official. She blinked. EU? Before she could open it, she heard footsteps. Quickly, she slipped it back and resumed sweeping. Akane entered, holding a fish he had caught. "For lunch," he said simply. She nodded, but her heart beat faster. A week later, at the stream, Kioma leaned in and whispered, "Amara, have you heard?" Heard what? Someone donated new books and desks to Ogidi Primary School. The headmistress says the donation came from an anonymous source, sent from the city. But get this. It was, "In your name," Amara laughed. "My name? How?" "I don't know. But people are talking. Some say you have a sugar daddy in the city. Others think Ekene is using you to gain fame." Amara's brows furrowed. She hadn't even known about the donation. She hadn't left the village since the wedding. Who would use her name? Later that night, as Ekene tended to the fire, Amara asked casually, "Did you hear about the school donation?" He didn't look up. "Yes. Good news?" "They said it was made in my name." He stirred the soup. "Perhaps someone admires you." She stared at him. "Ekene. Was it you?" He met her gaze for a brief second before saying, "Not everything needs to be known." And with that, he walked outside, leaving her alone with more questions than ever. Over the next few weeks, Ekene began disappearing every Saturday morning. "I'm going to trade herbs at the city market," he would say. "I'll be back before night." Amara found it odd. The nearest city, Lagosu, was hours away. And yet he returned looking fresher, sometimes wearing slightly cleaner clothes. Once he came back with new slippers for her and biscuits for her siblings. She asked no questions, but she watched. She noticed that when he thought she wasn't looking, he checked a small phone, sleek and modern, not the battered torchlight. Phones villagers used. It had no scratches. She'd seen it only once, but she never forgot it. Then there were the calls. Late one night, she woke to the sound of his voice, firm and fluent in perfect English. "Yes, delay the project until I confirm the vendor's report," he said. Amara sat up slowly. Through the curtain separating the main room from the porch, she saw him standing outside in the moonlight, phone to his ear. "Tell Mr. Edeni that I want a full report by Monday. And no, don't send the car yet. I'm still observing." Her breath caught. Who was he? One afternoon, while Ekene was away, Mama Izine said something that startled her. "That man you married. He is not from here." Amara frowned. "He said he was born in Ogidi." "Yes, but he left young, and when he came back, he gave me this." She reached under her mat and pulled out a fat envelope, stuffed with Naira notes. "He said it was for your siblings' school fees and my medicine." He said to say nothing. Amara stared. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to start hating him for being kind." Amara sat back, heart spinning. The man she thought was a poor wanderer was secretly paying her family's bills, disguising his money, watching in silence, and still, he had never demanded anything in return. It wasn't long before the villagers noticed. "Since Amara married that strange man, she wears clean clothes," one woman sneered. "I saw him give Uchenna's son a bag of rice. Who does that?" A man muttered. Ikene's quiet charity was beginning to stir envy. Some accused him of using charms. Others whispered that he was a fraudster hiding in the village. But Amara saw none of that in him. What she saw now, more clearly than ever, was a man who carried secrets like weights on his shoulders. She also noticed his eyes, how they lingered on her when she wasn't looking, how he smiled when her siblings hugged him, how he always gave her the better portion of food, even if he was hungry. And slowly, against her will, her heart began to thaw. The turning point came one Saturday when curiosity overcame caution. Ekene had left for Lagosu, but this time Amara followed him. She borrowed a bicycle and rode to the main road, hiding behind an old shed. She watched as a sleek black SUV pulled up beside him. A man in a suit stepped out and opened the door. Ekene entered without a word, and the car sped away. Her jaw dropped. SUVs didn't come to Ogidi unless it was an election year. And suits? That man looked like a banker. Amara waited, stunned. Later that evening, when he returned, she confronted him. "I saw the car." Ikeni froze. "I saw you leave with a man in a suit," she said. "I followed you." He sat down slowly. "I see. So who are you, Ikeni?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Do you remember what you told me the day we married? That you would never give me your heart?" She nodded. "That's why I never told you who I was. I wanted you to see me. Not the clothes, not the money. But you lied. No, I simply delayed the truth." "Are you a fraudster?" He chuckled softly. "No, I'm a businessman. I built a tech firm. Before I was 30, I walked away from it all because everyone I loved only saw the money. My name is Ekenedilichukwu Ume. I was the youngest tech billionaire in Lagosu before I vanished. My company still runs. I manage it from afar. I've been living in this village because I was tired of fake friends, fake love, fake loyalty." Tears burned in her eyes. "And me?" she asked. "Was I a test?" He shook his head. "No, you were a miracle. The days that followed Ikene's revelation were like the Harmattan winds, dry, sharp, and stirring everything loose inside Amara." She avoided his gaze. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of emotions. Betrayal, awe, disbelief, confusion. How had she, a poor village girl forced into marriage, ended up the wife of a billionaire? Not just any billionaire, but a man who had chosen to hide his riches, wear rags, and eat cassava with his hands just to test the weight of love. And she had hated him. 2 mornings later, she found a note under her pillow. "Amara, I never wanted to deceive you, but I had to know if someone could love me without my money. I understand if you choose to leave. If you stay, I promise to earn your heart the right way. Ikene." She clutched the letter to her chest, her eyes burning. This man had power, wealth, and influence. Yet he had bowed before her with nothing. He hadn't tried to buy her love. He had waited. Silently. Faithfully. And somehow, the way he had respected her space, never forcing her, never demanding her body or affection, made her feel seen in a way no man ever had. That evening, she waited for him at the fire, the soup, pot bubbling between them. "You once said I'd never give you my heart," she began. He looked up slowly, silent. "I don't know if I'm ready yet, but I'm willing to try." He blinked. For the first time, emotion flashed across his face. Soft, raw, vulnerable. "I'm not the same girl who married you," she continued. "And maybe you're not just the man I thought you were, but maybe we could meet somewhere in the middle." Ikeni didn't smile. He just nodded once, as though anything more would break him. But later that night, she felt his hand brush gently against hers as they lay in bed, not forceful, just asking to be allowed in. She didn't pull away. Weeks passed, and Amara found herself growing into a version of herself she had never known. Iken bought her books, romance novels, self-development guides, and even storybooks for her younger siblings. He began to teach her business strategies, helping her understand how to buy farm produce in bulk and sell them in the next village for profit. He didn't just give her money, he gave her tools. "You could be a queen in any market," he said, one day watching her arrange okra and yams. "All you need is confidence. And maybe a bit more cash," she joked. He laughed, a deep, rare sound that made her stomach flutter. But peace never stays long in a village where envy breeds. One hot afternoon, Amar returned from the market to find smoke rising beyond the hills. It was Ikene's herb farm, up in flames. Villagers gathered to watch as it burned, whispering in hushed voices. "The gods are angry with him. That man has brought strange wealth into Ogidi. He must be punished." Ikene arrived, breathless, his face twisted in grief. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He just watched it all fall. That night, Amara found him sitting in the dark. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He shook his head. "It was never about the herbs. I just hoped I could do something honest here. Small, but real." She took his hand. "Then we'll start again. Together." 3 days later, a car pulled into the village. It was sleek, black, with tinted windows. From it stepped a woman in heels, her lips painted crimson and her eyes sharp as razors. She was city, through and through. "Ekene," she called, ignoring the stares of the villagers. "You're coming back with me." Amara stood by the kitchen hut, heart pounding. "Not now, Zara," Ekene replied calmly. "We agreed. 3 months." "Your board is panicking," she snapped. "The Lagos branch is falling apart. We need you." She glanced at Amara. "This is your wife." Amara held her head high, even as her heart thudded. Zara snorted. "I see you've been slumming." Akeen stepped forward, voice low. "Watch your words." Zara rolled her eyes. "You can't seriously consider building a life here, with her. This isn't love, it's a fantasy. You have responsibilities." He looked at Amara, really looked at her, then he turned back to Zara. "My responsibility is where my heart is, and my heart is with her." That night, as they lay under the stars, Amara whispered, "You didn't have to choose me." "I didn't," he replied softly. "My heart did." She turned to him. "Then let me be worthy of it." He smiled and pulled her into his arms, and for the first time since their wedding, she didn't stiffen. She melted into him. It wasn't passion that consumed them that night. It was something deeper, a love born not of wealth or seduction, but of kindness, truth, and sacrifice. With time, the villagers began to change their tune. Ekene rebuilt the farm, this time bigger, stronger, and with solar irrigation. Amara began running a women's cooperative, helping village girls learn to trade and save. She used part of Ekene's funds to create a savings pot. No one knew the source, but they all praised her wisdom. Mama Izine's health improved. Amara's siblings returned to school with proper uniforms and books. And though they still lived, in a modest hut, the warmth between the walls had grown. They laughed often, worked side by side, and shared quiet kisses in the dusk light. On their 1-year anniversary, Ekene handed Amara a small box. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with her name engraved on it. "Amara, the Brave. I had it made in Johannesburg," he said, "because you reminded me that wealth means nothing if it cannot love." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "And you reminded me that love doesn't always look like a fairy tale. Sometimes it looks like a man who carries firewood and waits patiently for a heart to heal." Morning came heavy with the scent of fresh harmattan dust. Amara swept the compound while birds chirped lazily in the neem trees. Life had taken on a rhythm, simple, warm, and filled with purpose. But peace, she was learning, was a visitor, not a tenant. That day, a message arrived, delivered by a boy on a bicycle, sealed in gold-trimmed paper. It bore the crest of Odogwu Global Holdings. Ekene read it in silence. His jaw clenched. "They want me back," he said simply. Amara stood still, broom in hand. "For how long?" she asked. "Permanently." Her fingers tightened on the broomstick. He continued, "The board is threatening to vote me out if I don't return. They say the company's stock has dropped. Investors are scared. They think my disappearance is a sign of weakness." Amara swallowed hard. "And what do you want?" He looked at her, eyes searching. "I want us to decide. Together." The days that followed were restless. Amara stood at 2 roads. One led to a life of village simplicity. The markets, the women's cooperative, the laughter of her siblings. The other led to a world she couldn't imagine, Lagos, high-rises, boardrooms, private jets, and Ekin stood in both. At night, she lay in bed thinking of all she had built, of who she had become, a woman of worth, of rising dignity. And yet, the idea of letting him go crushed her. "What if I don't fit in your world?" she asked him one night. He caressed her cheek. "Then I'll make space, or burn the whole world down to build a new one for you. But I don't want you to lose your crown." He smiled. "I didn't marry a crown. I married a woman who taught me the value of things I forgot: humility, service, and love without price." 3 weeks later, they left for Lagos. The villagers gathered at the edge of Ogidi, waving tearfully, as the black SUV rolled away. Mama Izine cried into her wrapper. Amara's youngest brother clung to her hand until the very last second. It was her first time in a car with leather seats, her first time on a tarred road that didn't shake like a goat track, her first time seeing buildings that scraped the sky. Lagos hit her senses like a thunderstorm. Loud, fast, chaotic. The people, the noise, the honking danfos, the towering billboards. They arrived at a private estate nestled in Ikoyi. Glass, walls, palm trees, marble floors. "Welcome home," Ikini said, watching her reaction. She couldn't speak. Life in Lagos was nothing like the village. A cook prepared their meals. A driver stood on standby. A housekeeper folded her clothes before she even had the chance to. Amara walked through the mansion in quiet awe, unsure where she fit in. Ekene returned to work. Suits, meetings, video calls. He moved with confidence again, like a lion remembering his kingdom. But Amara, she felt like a ghost in a golden cage. No one insulted her, yet the silence of judgment followed her everywhere, through the halls, at charity galas, in the eyes of Ikene's elite friends. They smiled too tightly, asked too many questions. "Oh, so you're the village wife? Do you feel overwhelmed being here?" She's so natural. She knew what they meant. One evening, they attended a corporate gala. Akin's company was hosting global partners. The media was everywhere. Amara wore a gold dress, stitched for her by a designer flown in from Paris. But she still felt like a village girl wrapped in borrowed silk. The ballroom was vast. Men in tuxedos, women in glittering gowns. Amara clutched her glass and tried. Not to fidget, a woman in heels approached, Zara again. "Well," she purred, "you clean up nicely." Amara forced a smile. "You too. You do realize this is a jungle, right? The kind where women like you don't last long. The money, the pressure, the expectation. It will swallow you." "Maybe," Amara replied, coolly. "But I've lived in a jungle too, and I didn't just survive. I learned to grow roots." Zara blinked. Ekene arrived then, wrapping an arm protectively around Amara's waist. Zara sighed. "You're wasting your potential on nostalgia, Ekene." He smiled. "And you're wasting your life chasing power without purpose." That night, Amara broke down. "I don't belong here," she sobbed. "I don't know what fork to use at dinner. I don't know how to pose for cameras. I don't know this world." Ekene knelt in front of her. "Then let me teach you, or let's burn the damn forks and eat with our hands." She laughed through tears. "You don't need to change," he whispered. "You just need to own who you are, and let them catch up." The next week, Amar began attending etiquette classes. Not to become someone new, but to better wear the crown she already had. She met with women CEOs, started sharing ideas about rural trade development, and even spoke at a press conference, with Ikene announcing a foundation to empower village girls. She didn't trade her roots for pearls. She wore them with her roots. The press called her the village rose, soft but with thorns, a symbol of dignity and transition. And when, The company's stocks bounced back. Iken said, "It wasn't me. It was her. She reminded us what we were building it all for." One evening, Akene blindfolded her and led her into a new building in Lekki. Inside stood a business center, painted in warm earth tones with local art and market motifs. "This," he said, "is your legacy, a training hub for women from rural areas. We'll fly them in, teach them trade, finance, digital skills, then send them back to build their own businesses." Amara stared at him, stunned. "You built this for me?" "No," he said. "You built this through every struggle you lived. I just turned your story into bricks and mortar." She broke into tears. Overwhelmed months later, at the annual African Women in Business Summit, Amara stood at the podium. She wore a coral bead necklace from her village and heels from Paris. "I used to think wealth was gold and mansions," she said into the microphone. "But now I know. It's love, it's vision, it's dignity." The hall erupted in applause. Iken stood at the back, pride glowing in his eyes. She found him later and whispered, "Thank you for hiding your billions." He chuckled. "Best investment I ever made." The dry season returned with its familiar orange skies and cracked earth. The news had spread like wild Harmattan fire. Amara, the poor village girl who married a nobody, had become something more. But in Ogidi, where the palm trees whispered secrets and old grudges refused to die, not everyone was clapping. It started with a letter to the village chief. Akene and Amara were coming home. This time, not in a rickety truck, but a convoy of sleek, black SUVs flanked by security and media vans. The same villagers who once whispered behind her back now rushed to repaint walls, trim hedges, and plant new flowers along the dusty path. Drums beat as they entered the village square. Women ululated. Children waved tiny flags bearing her foundations. Logo: the Village Rose Initiative. Amara stepped out of the car in a white lace dress, her natural hair wrapped in a regal green geode. Akene held her hand as they walked forward together, the sun crowning them in golden glory. It was no longer pity in the eyes of the villagers, it was reverence. But behind the cheers were the stares of those who once mocked her. Her father, Chief Okoro, stood in his compound, arms crossed, pride fighting guilt in his eyes. He had lost the chieftaincy 2 years after marrying off Amara. His drinking, his debts, and his temper had finally caught up with him. The council stripped him of his title. Amara stood before the compound gate. "Papa," she said softly. He grunted, then turned away. "Mama isn't here," he muttered. "She died last year. Typhoid." A stab of grief pierced her heart. "I came to pay my respects," she said, voice steady. He nodded, still not meeting her eyes. "You look different." "I'm the same girl you sold off for your reputation." His jaw tightened. "I did what I had to." "No, Papa." "You did what your pride told you to." She turned and walked away. She had said her piece. Later that day, she visited the women's group. The same women who had once giggled behind her back when she walked barefoot to fetch water, the ones who called her the cursed daughter. This time they stood in colorful wrappers, clutching their purses and fake smiles. "Amara," one crooned, "you've changed. Oh, you are now a madam. We always knew you'd go far." She smiled sweetly. "Is that so? Then why did none of you lend Mama money when she begged you to?" Silence. She turned to them. "You mocked the girl. But I came back for the girls still. Suffering. My foundation is funding a trade center here. You can teach sewing, weaving, or farming, if you're willing to work. No more free gossip." Some nodded, ashamed. Others grumbled under their breath. But Amara no longer needed their approval. Akene organized a community festival, one that hadn't been celebrated in Ogidi for years. There were dance competitions, scholarships awarded, and local farmers given. Tractors. He stood before the villagers and made a declaration. "I'm building a modern school here," he announced, "and a hospital wing. Every child in Ogidi will have a future bigger than mine." The crowd roared. Then he gestured toward Amara. "But all this began because one woman believed in me when I had nothing." Tears brimmed in her eyes. That night, fireworks lit the sky, drums beat until dawn, but peace is never perfect. 2 weeks later, Aken received an urgent call. A foreign investor offered to double the value of his entire company, on one condition: he had to move abroad. Permanently. "Paris," Akene said. "They want me to run the company from there. Full relocation, everything, houses, offices, schools." "And what do you want?" Amara asked him. "I want to grow the business. But not if it costs us." She bit her lip. "I'm not afraid of Paris, but I am afraid of forgetting who we are." "You won't," he said. "We'll carry the village with us." That night they prayed, just like they did back in the tiny Ogidi room with no windows. And in the morning they made a plan. They would take the deal, but they would also decentralize the foundation, leave a team to run the schools and clinics led by women from the village. Amara would fly back every quarter, checking the projects, herself, and they would never let their children forget their roots. 5 years later, the story became legend. Amara and Akene moved to Paris, where he became one of Africa's youngest billionaire CEOs. Their foundation spread across West Africa, empowering rural women, educating girls, and bringing clean water to places long forgotten. Their twin daughters, Kioma and Amira, grew up bilingual, spending half the year in Nigeria, learning to pound yam and speak Igbo. Amara wrote a book, From Firewood to Fortune. It became a bestseller, and every year, on her birthday, she returned to the exact spot her father gave her away. Only this time, she gave scholarships, handed out jobs, and rebuilt broken homes. She had once been sold like a burden. Now, she returned, as a blessing. One day, she stood before the girls of Ogidi at a conference. "My name is Amara Okoro. I was born poor. I was mocked. I was abandoned. But I found love, not because I changed, but because someone saw my worth. Don't wait for someone to rescue you. Become your own miracle. And remember, no matter how far you rise, your roots are your crown." Thunderous applause. The higher you climb, the more the wind tries to blow you down. 5 years after rising from village ridicule to billionaire glory, Amara sat at her foundation's Lagos headquarters, unaware that a silent storm was brewing within the walls she built with love. The Village Rose Initiative had bloomed across Africa. There were now 22 community schools, 15 medical outposts, and over 300 women-run agricultural co-ops. Amara was celebrated. Her face appeared on magazine covers and her speeches aired on global platforms. But in the corridors of her success, envy took root. It started small, missing reports, late salary disbursements. Then rumors, allegations that some of the branch leaders were mismanaging funds. At first, Amara didn't believe it. These were women she'd lifted from the mud, trusted with budgets and blueprints, until the whistleblower came. Her name was Ngozi, a bright 27-year-old from Aba, one of the first girls to receive a scholarship under Amara's pilot school. She now worked in the accounting unit. "Madam," she said nervously one evening, "I have to show you something, but I'm scared." "Talk to me, Ngozi." "No one. Will hurt you." Ngozi slid a folder across the desk. "There's a branch in Enugu and another in Ogun State. They've been falsifying expenses, embezzling, using fake suppliers." Amara's heart sank as she flipped through pages of evidence. Receipts for building materials that were never delivered, teachers listed on payrolls who didn't exist, even ghost orphanages receiving donations. The betrayal burned deeper because She recognized the names. One of the perpetrators was Chidinma, a woman she had once fed during her lowest moments. Another was Bola, who had stood beside her at her mother's funeral. Amara flew straight home to Paris that night, the papers clutched. In her hand, Ekene listened in silence as she poured out the details. "They stole from the girls," she said bitterly. "They stole from the dreams we built." "You have to act," he said, gently but firmly, "even if they were once your friends. But they'll say, I'm bringing women down. I'll be torn apart in the media. They didn't fall. They jumped. You gave them wings. They used them to steal." The investigation Amara launched an internal audit and hired an independent anti-corruption firm. The backlash was swift. Blogs claimed she was turning on her sisters. Protesters gathered outside her Lagos office, waving placards that said, "Empower, don't destroy," and "Why are you jailing your own?" But she pressed on. Because it wasn't about saving her image, it was about saving the truth. Within 3 months, 6 top regional directors were arrested. $5 million in stolen funds were traced and recovered. Chidinma wept in court, claiming she only stole to pay school fees for her brother. But Amara remained silent. Because her own mother had died begging for medicine no one gave. The world was watching. Supporters praised her courage. Detractors accused her of class betrayal. For the first time in years, Amara began to question her vision. "Maybe I'm not cut out for this," she told Akini one night. "Maybe I was never meant to lead." He pulled her close. "Do you know what I saw the day I met you in Ogidi?" She shook her head. "I saw fire. In your eyes, in your walk, in your fight. You don't dim fire because it burns. You use it to cook, to warm, to lead. You didn't fail, Amara. You purified." When Amara returned to Ogidi, she expected cold stares. Instead, the women greeted her with songs. Mama Light, they called her. They had heard the truth. The local schools and clinics that almost collapsed were being rebuilt, this time with a new policy. Each region would train 3 teenage girls every year in financial literacy and management. Amara believed the future belonged to them, not the corrupt. To rebuild trust, Amara did something bold. She published the entire foundation's finances online, down to every kobo spent. She invited critics to form a community oversight committee, ordinary villagers given power to question any decision, and she rebranded. From the Village Rose Initiative, the organization became RISE, Rebuilding Integrity, Strength, and Empowerment. One Sunday evening in Paris, as the twins painted on the balcony and Ekene grilled suya on a fancy barbecue set, Amara received a strange visitor. Ngozi. She looked different, confident, dressed in a smart suit. "I'm going back to Nigeria," Ngozi said, "to lead one of the regions, if you'll let me." Amara smiled. "No one else I'd trust more." She stood up, shook her hand, and whispered, "Lead with fire." Amara faces betrayal from within her foundation. She makes the hard decision to expose corruption, risking her reputation. The experience forces a transformation, both in her vision and the organization's structure. She empowers new voices and younger leaders like Ngozi, ensuring the future is brighter than the past. Sometimes healing comes not from medicine or money, but from truth buried in silence. One evening, just as summer began to settle over Paris, Amara received a phone call that would change everything. Again. It was Uncle Chuka, the man who'd taken her in after her mother's passing. His voice cracked through the line. "Amara! It's your Auntie Nu. She's gone." Amara's breath caught. Auntie No had raised her mother like a sister. She was the last connection to her mother's youth. Her laughter, her secrets, her grief. "I'll come," she said. "First flight tomorrow." When Amara stepped into the old mud brick house in Ogidi, everything felt smaller. The furniture had worn down. The scent of palm oil and dust still clung to the walls. Auntie No's body lay peacefully in a simple casket draped with white lace. Women wept softly in the corner. Ekene and the twins remained in Paris. This was something Amara had to do alone. After the burial, she wandered to the room that once belonged to her mother. The windows creaked. The floor moaned under her feet. She opened the old wardrobe and found her mother's faded wrapper, still folded the way she'd left it. Tucked underneath was a wooden box. Inside, a single letter. The letter was addressed to my Amara, my star. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. My sweet daughter. If you are reading this, I did not live long enough to see you bloom, but I always knew you would rise. I tried to protect you the best I could, with my hands, my back, and my silence. There is something I never told you. Your father was not the man they whispered about. Your father was educated, kind, but he was taken from me before you were born. He was a journalist, and he discovered something, proof of a crooked land deal involving the chief and some foreign developers. He wanted to expose it. 2 days later, he died in an accident. They said it was the brakes, but I knew better. I was afraid. I kept silent. I said he ran away. I let you grow up thinking you were abandoned because it was safer. Forgive me, my star. You were born from courage, not shame. Never forget that. With all my love, Mema. Amara sat frozen on the floor, the letter pressed to her heart. Tears streamed down her face. All those years she'd believed her father had left them, that her mother had been too weak to keep him. But now she knew the truth. Her parents had both been victims of power and silence. By the time Amara flew back to Paris, something had changed in her. She wasn't just building schools anymore. She was going to build justice. She launched a new branch of RICE dedicated to press freedom, rural investigative journalism, and land transparency. It was named the Star Project, in honor of her mother's words. They trained village girls not only to read and write, but to ask hard questions, file right-to-information requests, and use media to protect their communities. Within a year, they had uncovered 4 illegal land seizures in eastern Nigeria and helped over 800 villagers reclaim their ancestral lands. But power doesn't fall quietly. In January, one of the young reporters was attacked after publishing a story about a corrupt local politician. Amara received anonymous threats in her inbox. You think you're a queen? Stay in Paris, or we'll make sure your star never rises again. Ekene begged her to back down. You have done enough. You've changed lives. You have children. Please, Amara. But she remembered the letter, and she looked at her daughters. I have to make sure they grow up in a country where the truth doesn't die in the dark. A month later, Amara held a press conference. She displayed evidence of illegal mining permits forged by high-ranking officials. She revealed ties between the assailants and politicians still in office. The fallout was explosive. A national outcry followed. Investigations were launched. 3 powerful men were arrested. The 4th, a former minister, fled the country. It was the biggest scandal to rock Nigeria in a decade, and it started with a letter beneath a bed. That night, Amara returned home to Ekene. He looked at her in silence for a long time. I was wrong, he finally said. You weren't born to rest. You were born to rise. She smiled softly and walked into his arms. But I'm still tired, she whispered. He kissed her forehead. Then let me carry you for a while. 9-year-old Zara, their eldest daughter, was already writing stories for her school paper. My mama is a truth fighter, she wrote. She plants flowers where lies used to grow. And Amara knew her work would never end. But neither would her legacy. Amara discovers a letter from her late mother revealing that her father was murdered for uncovering corruption. This truth renews her purpose and leads to the creation of a press freedom arm of her foundation. She faces fresh threats, but bravely exposes a national scandal. Her marriage strengthens as Ekene accepts her destiny as a changemaker. Her daughter begins to walk in her footsteps, signaling a generational impact. Poor village girl was forced to marry a poor man, unaware he is a secret billionaire. The storm had passed, but the winds of change had not. Amara had dismantled corruption with truth. She had turned from a village girl into a warrior of justice. She was no longer just the founder of RIZ or the wife of a billionaire. She was now the symbol of a rising Africa. But symbols come at a price. 3 months after the scandal shook the nation, Amara received an unexpected visit at her Paris home. A delegation from Abuja had come with a proposal. They wanted her to run for Senate, not as a puppet, not as a token woman, as the people's candidate. "You have the people's heart," said the head delegate. "The old powers are crumbling. We need leaders who can't be bought." Amara sat stunned. She had never dreamed of politics. It was dirty, risky. It killed her father. It nearly cost her life. "But what if I become what I hate?" she asked. The delegate smiled. "Then maybe. You're exactly what the system needs." That night she sat with Ekene on the balcony, watching the Eiffel Tower light up in the distance. "I didn't marry a senator," he said, trying to sound light-hearted. "No," Amara replied. "You married a girl who had no shoes." They both chuckled, but the tension returned quickly. "I'm afraid, Amara, politics in Nigeria is a blood sport. I already watched you bleed once. I don't want to do it again." She nodded. "Neither do I, but maybe that's why I must." When Amara announced her candidacy, the world took notice. Her campaign slogan, "Truth is Power." Volunteers flooded in from across the country. Young people, women, teachers, former street hawkers who now ran businesses because of RIZ. She refused foreign donors. She refused political endorsements. She stood in marketplaces, under sun and rain, speaking to mothers with aching backs and boys with calloused hands. "I am not here to promise you heaven. I am here to promise you a mirror, the kind that doesn't lie." Her words spread like fire. And the old guard, they noticed. 1 week before the election, Amara was driving back from a rural town hall meeting when a black SUV blocked her convoy. Gunmen jumped out and sprayed bullets. Her security team acted fast. Shots rang out. Screams filled the air. Amara ducked under the seat, praying with trembling lips. When it was over, her driver had been shot. 1 bodyguard died. The rest of her team survived, and so did she. The next morning, she held a press conference. No makeup, no prepared speech, just truth. "They tried to kill me, just like they killed my father. But I will not die with my voice, in my throat." She held up a blood-stained campaign leaflet. "This is not just ink. This is history refusing to be erased." Social media exploded. "Amara will not fall" trended across Africa. Artists drew murals of her face. Students marched with signs that read, "Our star will shine." She had become more than a candidate. She had become a revolution. On the day of the vote, millions turned out. Villages where ballots were often stolen stood guard all night. For the first time in years, the people believed. When results came in, Amara had won by a landslide. The streets erupted. Old women ululated. Children danced. Fireworks painted the sky. She walked onto the podium and raised her hand, not in victory, but in promise. "I am not here to rule. she said. "I am here to serve." But destiny has one more twist one. Quiet evening as she prepared for her swearing-in ceremony, a letter arrived at her doorstep. There was no name on it, only a golden seal. Inside was a confession. Your father was not killed in an accident. I was there. I silenced him. I am sorry. My time is ending. But yours is just beginning. Use your light better than I used my darkness. It was signed by Chief Agu, the same man who had once spit on her mother's name. He died 3 days later of natural causes, but the past had finally spoken its truth. On the morning she became Senator Amara Okoye, she wore her mother's wrapper beneath her tailored suit, the same one that had once smelled of sweat and palm oil. She walked past the marble pillars of the Senate House, not as a guest, but as a lawmaker. In her oath, she added a line not found in the official script. "And I swear to protect the voices," buried in silence, as if they were my own. And no one dared stop her. 2 months into her term, she wrote an open letter. It was published in every major Nigerian newspaper, to every girl who has been told she is too poor, too small, too female. They once told me the same. I lived in a hut. I fetched water. I wore torn uniforms. I was almost sold. I was almost silenced. And yet, here I am. You don't need to marry a billionaire to become powerful. But if you ever find a man who sees your fire and doesn't try to put it out, hold him close. And most importantly, hold yourself closer. Because your crown isn't given, it is born. Years later, at a school named after her in Ogidi, a little girl stood in front of a painted wall. On it was a mural of Amara holding a book in one hand and scales of justice in the other. The girl turned to her teacher and asked, "Is it true? She used to have no shoes?" The teacher smiled. "Yes, and that's why she made sure you would never go without." Epilogue. The billionaire's garden keen remained by her side, not in her shadow, but as her anchor. He never returned to big business. Instead, he started an agricultural fund for rural women. "Let the real billionaires grow roots," he often said, "not just buildings." And every night, he still kissed Amara's forehead and whispered, "You are still my miracle." The end.